Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto, and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by Neil, Paul, Eli, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Good afternoon.
Let's get it on.
Hey, good afternoon.
There will be no roboting today.
Well, we'll soon find out about that.
There will be some.
I don't know if I'd be that confident, Neil. We shall see. We will find out.
No, there will be no roboting.
In time, we will be disappointed if there wasn't roboting, Neil. So we will endeavour to do some housekeeping questions in the meantime before we find out the excitement level of our audience based on the robot level of Neil. Meanwhile, any evidence of any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics. His internet connection so good, he got the question before I even said it that time. Amazing internet.
No evidence.
What about any evidence of the distance to the sun? I don't mind the protracted 10-second silences after a housekeeping question. I mean, it's profound. I'll try that once more. We'll pretend it didn't happen. If I was editing the video, I'd just remove the great long protracted silence. Let's try that one more time. Let's try and engage Discord first. You're there, Discord.
I'm here.
Hi, I'm not Discord, but is my sound good?
Yeah, you sound all right, Owen. You tend to.
Can I ask a question?
Why are we doing a sound check at the beginning of a live show? Of course you can ask.
It's about the housekeeping questions.
Oh, thank God. Thank God. Yes, please.
Right. Aren't these questions for, like, not us, for, like, the other side?
For the audience, metaphorically speaking, they are to convey the arguments that have been won in the past in regards to the debate. Well, the debate is the nature of the world, with the two largest opposing sides being the Earth is flat, because that's how it's measured, and the Earth is a sphere, because it's measured flat. I mean, that's an interesting position to find yourself in, but the housekeeping questions summarise the rebuttal positions to the notion that Earth is a sphere based on its flat measurements, and their assertions with their religious beliefs of things like R values. Moving on, any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
Not since 2020, 1st of January, with the Black Swan.
You know something, Righteous? What you've said is actually quite profound. Because today I was watching Lewis Rossman on an unrelated subject talking about Sony digitally roofying their customers by suggesting that they're purchasing something but burying a redefining of the word purchase in their EULA. And his disdain towards it is to say or suggest that if you've purchased something and then they take it away from you, as is the case in this instance, because they've put something, on page 20 that you never read, then going away and just reclaiming that particular item that you purchased via piracy would, in his mind, be justified. If there's no ownership to be implied by a purchase, then how can I be depriving someone of their ownership of something when I don't own the license and merely wanted the material I've already paid for. That's his overall argument as quickly as I can summarize it. However, I've got to give that as a preface to say that his attitude towards that is to say, be the whole bitch. If you're going to be a bitch, don't be a little bit of a bitch. Go right out, right ahead of the game, before the customer gets there in this instance, and say, you're not going to get to purchase this, it's not yours. Yeah, it's got the word purchase next to it, but that doesn't mean purchase anymore, says Sony. Okay? Be the whole bitch, put it right there in the front page before they purchase it. That's his attitude. I'm going to be that bitch when it comes to flat earth. And what Righteous has just pointed out is, why are we asking these questions? These are directly related to the antithesis of a claim that we would make in the reaffirmation of a rebuttal that we're providing after long debate. Now, I'm not decrying the use of the housekeeping questions, just in case anybody thinks we're going to relinquish them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there must be a slight readjustment of our attitude. If we're going to say Earth's measured flat, that's how it is. We're going to put it on page 1 from now on, rather than saying the globers don't really understand their own model and how it doesn't work. Who cares? Earth is measured flat. Earth is dealt with flat. Earth is flown on flat. Earth is built on flat. Earth is sailed on flat. Earth is flat. The
Can I
derivation
ask
of the
a
maps are
question,
flat.
Nathan?
That little rant needed Neil. Go ahead, Neil.
Why don't we put a new housekeeping question in and say, is there any ballers that could show us any proof that Earth is not measured flat? Why don't we switch it and drop it on them?
Nah, because I want to be the whole bitch. Earth is measured flat. Do I want to suggest to my opponent that they might provide me with evidence that that is not the case? No. It is the case. Feel free to challenge that. There's an open door daily, Neil.
Yeah, I know, but it's just they can't, because we know Earth is measured, navigated, everything flat. It was always flat. It was never a sphere.
Yeah.
So let them come in and try to freaking prove it is not flat.
Yeah, indeed. Well, their assertions just come from a begging the question fallacy that Earth is automatically a sphere and measurements that measure Earth flat. And I stand by my assertion that will be the ongoing outset of our disclaimers at the beginning of these shows. Earth is measured flat. That's my claim. Not because it's something that is in need of proving, because should you attempt to prove Earth spherical, you will require Earth to be measured flat also. This is demonstrably the case, and I'm going to stand by it with a bit more, I want to say bullshiness. I don't think of the right word. Confidence. We're criticising our opponents for conning people. However, we're not conning people when we say something as fact that is fact. You do require a certain degree of confidence to be able to say that, though. Go ahead, whoever that was. Eli. Go on, if you're going to try and get a word in. There it is again. Neil, go ahead.
Well, I want to hear from Eli because he wasn't around the other day. And when you played that show from Ballbusters concerning 24/7 and gas having weight, I wanted to hear from Eli because he's always there.
Okay, maybe we can come to that. You're about Eli? At some point in the show, I want to open up this platform to other Discord servers, one of which being 24/7, probably the first. So, as you're a frequent flyer in 24/7 Discord server, you may be my facilitation to help. Paul's been making inroads in that direction too, so that's a discussion that we may have, I don't know, in the pre-show, in the after show, sorry.
I missed the first part of that. What'd you say?
I'm going to expand out which server that I'm in. So on occasion,
Nice.
we will venture into 24/7 instead of Flat Earth Science versus Pseudoscience, which is my resident server, if you will. But that may be made easier with someone like you, and Paul, as I just said, is making inroads to make that possible and a usual showtime.
Yeah, for sure. I could definitely make that happen.
Excellent. The
Or
reason for
easier.
this is because there was a certain degree, while Paul was making these inroads, of criticism of Paul to not just address the mods and say, why aren't you making this particular argument in this particular instance? For example, if they're attempting to put across an argument that Earth is measured flat with an elevation angle argument, and the opponent just starts talking about angles and then using those angles to prove a sphere, there's a type of readdressment of the argument that isn't taking place necessarily in 24/7. The criticism of Paul was, why haven't you just told the mod that? So, well, because he's trying to communicate with almost my YouTube hat on to make inroads to make that more digestible for all of that server.
Yeah, it's like see the thing is, like, you know, we all have a Wu-Tang style. I don't know if you'll get the reference, but it's like I and very few others bring that to 24/7. So it's more like a specialty. Like seeing the guy with the good kung fu come through, you know, you get a little envy, you get a little praise, and that's it. But I want to make it more of a norm. This would do that, because then they would understand why I do what I do. Because sometimes they might think, oh, it's boring when, you know, a guy is going to be a troll and fun for 2 hours. But it's like, don't you want the conclusion for the people that we're supposed to be helping, the people that actually want the information, rather than talking to some anti-flat earther who wants to talk you around a table for like forever? So,
Right. Again, as I say, there might be some further discussion on this in the after show in regards to what is essentially the logistical task of getting our message to be more prevalent in a very large server that's directly associated with this subject. Hopefully that makes sense now. Yes, Nathan, perfectly clear. Excellent. Well, I'm glad we covered it. Anyway, we're going to cover Sabine again. So we did do a little bit of an opener into this, and I didn't do a thumbnail of it because we didn't really get to it until late in the show. We extended the show, and I don't know. I want to have it as a more primary focus, and given that we're starting halfway through at a point in the video where we know what she's going to be saying and such like, I think it's only right that we cover the rest of it, as I think there's going to be more useful information in this. Oh, Divergent Droid just beat me to it. So going by in the chat right now, there's a link to Sabine Hossenfelder's video titled "Gravity is not a force, full stop." But what does that mean? It means you'll beg the question of a force automatically in place by moving the scale, Sabine. We've already established that. But nevertheless, let her know at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. Now we are, and I may cover this as well in the live show today, utterly suppressed beyond my comprehension up until this point. Big shout out to Mr. Cheswick. So Mr. Cheswick is a videographer and musician who pointed out on a live stream yesterday just how suppressed we actually are in YouTube searches, bearing in mind that the algorithm is supposed to favor your searches and your preferences when you search in YouTube. Mr. Cheswick is undoubtedly a flat earther. Now, while he might not be a massive contributor to this show, he knows who we are, and certainly in his video made a specific example of seeing whether or not he could find me as a flat earther, as someone on our own side, and what lengths he had to... Let's try that again without my tongue getting caught in my mouth. What lengths he had to go to in order to get any of our videos to appear. Now, at one stage, after instigating a bazillion different filters to cut out everything he did not want in this subject arena, he eventually got to a point where he could find me as a channel with just my thumbnail of me in a suit in the Gadget Show studio. My thumbnail, basically, for Nathan Oakley 1980, with my channel name next to it, when making specific searches for things like Flat Earth Debate. And I said in his comments, 2,000 plus shows on this subject with that specific title, and even if you type in that specific title with a load of friggin' filters to get you to clear out all the crap of Simon Dan and Professor Dave Explains, you still do not find a single one of these shows. What an outrage. Why have I strapped this on while I'm saying, please go and let Sabine know at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me? It's because more so than ever when I reiterate this fact that we get absolutely no algorithmic support, and it's at least seems to me that it has got significantly worse in the last 12 months. Yeah, means that more than ever I need your shares. Yeah, algorithmically we are stifled to the point where it's not just accidental, it's not just one little button press, people are on the algorithmic side of YouTube are going out of their way to literally suppress us. That's the situation. Now, I had no idea it got to the point where I could elaborate it in those terms to that extent. But it is. If you don't believe me, go and have a look at Mr. Cheswick's video. Just look, I was quite horrified. Now, I can do that at my end, but obviously it's skewed differently for me as my own YouTube channel that I'm searching on my own YouTube site, if that makes sense. But for somebody else like Mr. Cheswick, you can see how an outsider searches, which is something that I can't do, and I'm not prepared to put whatever they are, VPNs and proxies and all the rest of it, to try and trick the algorithm into not realizing it's me looking for me. I don't have to if someone else is doing it, and I can just direct you to that video. So I would suggest you go and check out that video by Mr. Cheswick. Subscribe, he's a friendly. Not that I wouldn't suggest you don't subscribe to Sabine when you go and let her know at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me, so that we receive some algorithmic love should she respond. Like, perspective, that's all, what's the word? A potential for her to potentially put a link to my video if she ever responded. Anyway, hopefully that's given people enough time to actually go to her channel and let them know. Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. We also covered it yesterday if you want to check the first 5 minutes of this particular video that we did respond to in the latter half of the show. Any comments before we actually get started and I click play?
Yes.
No, go ahead, wherever that was.
It is an outrage of why you can't be found anywhere other than here. And they can at least give the courtesy of suggesting us. But I believe it's so devastating for them. They do listen, Nathan. Everyone you review, they listen. And it's so devastating to them. That's why you're not being suggested or shown any love. Sorry, but that's it. We're killing it.
Well, I just did a search and you're number 3 on the list if you sort by upload date.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, I can force it by filtering YouTube searches. If I filter my own name daily, I can get me to appear. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that you cannot find me. But the only way I can reiterate my point is to get you to go to Mr. Cheswick's video. So I'm sure he's grateful that people will go, well, based on what Paul's just said and what I've just searched, yeah, I can search me and find me too. But there's, like I say, without it, putting VPN and all the rest of it in place to find what would happen if I was just random Joe or even someone on my own side looking, then that's what Mr. Cheswick is. He's not involved with the show. He's not constantly, like you, Paul. I'm not suggesting that you particularly do this, but you might be more inclined to search by the particular title or find a link by another means so that it's playing on your videos, and therefore you've already found me. So by means of the YouTube algorithm already knowing you've already found me, it's not going to withhold that from you. But what I'm saying is Mr. Cheswick, who isn't like you, he's not partaking in the show. He's just like any other flat earther, happens to be a videographer. Yes, we may have mentioned him once or twice, but his search is far more relevant to me in terms of what could be algorithmically offered to somebody who's actually found their way to maybe someone like me. And then they go, well, what else is on offer? They're not going to find me. Do you see what I mean? So it differs from person to person, but without literally playing Mr. Cheswick's video right here, right now to make my point, yeah, just go and check out his stream. That's all I've got to say. Any other points before we move on and actually play the video that we've suggested you all go and let her know we're about to play and we haven't yet? Any more comments? Feel free. No.
Second, you cannot, of course, use the spring to measure the velocity of the rocket, because velocity in and of itself is a meaningless concept. You can only talk about relative velocities, not...
So it's a concept that's meaningless, and yet you've ascribed that velocity that we're travelling in an upward direction when you decry gravity as a force. This is the height of doublespeak.
Absolute ones. This is why Einstein's theories have the word relative in them. This brings us to the third and most important point that...
What you're saying is the reason this doublespeak doesn't make any sense is explained away by Einstein just adding the word relative. Yeah, a bit like that claimed to be neurosurgeon that came, and every time we pointed out that NASA's saying it's flat, he said it's just relative.
That we learn from the spring. Acceleration is not relative, it's absolute. You can measure how much you're accelerated, for example, with that spring, and you
So when the spring's stationary, it's not moving, you're holding it, you're not moving, you're inserting this idea that that infers we are definitely accelerating. No, demonstrably not. You just need us to be for this rhetoric to make sense when you don't have a force anymore. Oh, well, then we do, because we're always accelerating. Look at this spring. This is a cheap trick. Yeah? We're all being heliocentric roofied. Yeah? Accepting some notion that we wouldn't normally accept, but for the fact that we've got a double-speaking con artist telling us that it's true. No. If I'm demonstrably not moving, not accelerating, and I hold a spring with something dangling from it, I don't then go, oh, well, this means I'm moving. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Not at all. What? But Einstein can explain it in a fourth dimension in a pseudo-geometry. Well, that doesn't affect reality in any way, shape, or form now, does it?
You can tell when you're not accelerated. So we have a spring
Well, we're not at zero? Like, what, falling?
on a rocket in outer space. All right.
Yeah. Like in an orbital motion, when you're described as feeling 0g. Yeah, when you're perpetually acclaimed to be falling around a planet that's been taken by an inference of a flat Earth measurement to say that we're on a spherical surface that then needs a force to hold us to it, but isn't a force because it isn't a force in Einstein's pseudo-geometry. But ultimately, we're always moving up on a ball. And it's only relative to whichever point on the ball that you're actually describing, because obviously a ball can't all be more moving up in all directions at all times. That makes no sense. No, it's because this doesn't make sense. There is no force of gravity. There is no force holding you on a ball because you're not on a ball. The Keplerian notions of being ball-shaped to infer where planets and stars, according to him, will be by predictive measures that take the mathematics of a flat Earth measurement of those stars in their angular relationships and puts them on a ball doesn't mean we're on a ball. And doesn't mean we need to imply that we've got some pseudo-force, non-force force that you can think of as a force, because Einstein's pseudo-geometry says it's a bent geodesic in a space-time dimension that we don't experience in physical reality. This is far easier to take apart than a fundamentalist religious belief that we just do have a force holding us to the ground. No, better have that ball flying up in all directions relative to where you describe it from, because that'll make sense. That's just total con.
What's this got to do with gravity? Well, this is where Einstein's genius comes in. Einstein said, let's put the spring in a box from which you can't look out. You have no idea what's going on outside. We tie the box with you and the spring to a rocket. The rocket blasts off. What happens? Well, the spring expands again. Einstein now said that if you're in the box, you can't tell whether you're being accelerated or whether you're sitting still on the surface of a planet.
So it's just a great big fat begging the question fallacy with a hypothetical example that it'll take into a pseudo-geometry momentarily. Exactly as predicted.
He then said if there isn't any measurement that you can do to tell these situations apart, they're physically indistinguishable.
Therefore, if you can't tell that you're not moving or moving because you're in a box and you can't see the outside, but you're in a rocket in a space in a theoretical example, then because you can't detect that you're actually moving or have motion in the box in the theoretical example, you not detecting having any motion on Earth actually means you are subject to a force. So because I can give a scenario where you don't experience a force, but there is actually one, you not experiencing one now means there is one. Genius.
That is, in a small box, the effect of gravity on the surface of a planet is indistinguishable from acceleration in the...
So not feeling anything is indistinguishable from acceleration. Yeah, genius.
absence of gravity. This is what's called the equivalence principle.
Oh, I heard about this on Fight the Flat Earth Woman Beaters channel when he said it was E equals MC squared.
The point where people usually go wrong is to conclude that because gravity is indistinguishable from acceleration...
Because gravity, a non-force, is indistinguishable from an acceleration that would give you a force. But because in an Einsteinian example where you can't detect that force, the non-force that we don't experience and can't feel on Earth is actually a force then. Wow. I mean, this is just genius, really. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Nathan. Hey, everyone.
That means gravity accelerates you, but that
So this non-force accelerates things. That makes no sense at all.
isn't so, because to accelerate something you need a force, and gravity is not a force.
Well, it's almost like you're double speaking in circles now, really, isn't it, Sabine?
Einstein's equivalence principle says
Einstein's equivalence principle makes a non-force force into a force that you can think of as a force, but not actually a force, because it's a non-detectable force that if you did have a force and you didn't know it was a force, because you couldn't experience it and didn't know it was happening, that's essentially the same as you on Earth not experiencing any force and not knowing that there's anything happening. Therefore, there is actually a force, because you're accelerated upwards. It's amazing how easy it is to keep a track of this absolute garbage, really, isn't it, Sabine?
that you are accelerated if you sit still in a gravitational field. This is because
Sorry, what gravitational field would that be? Would that be the pseudo-Riemannian geometry of a bent geodesic that we are now sitting in? No, that would be a reification fallacy. Ding, 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 ding. No, we can't sit in a bent geodesic in space-time when that is merely a mathematical description. No, that's a reification fallacy. Did you know that you'd messed this up when you said it? Because we can't do that. This is where we win every time with Einstein, by the way, Sabine, because all of your comparisons from here forth will be taking place in a pseudo-geometry, won't they? Now, you won't tell the audience that your little bait and switch is about to take place, or in reality just did, but I do.
the only way to sit still in a gravitational field is to have a force acting on you that...
Oh, so in the pseudo-geometry, the only way it works is if there's a force already acting on you. I see. It's a shame it's only taking place and needs to be explained in the pseudo-geometry, because that doesn't affect our reality in any way, shape or form.
prevents you from falling. For example, because that floor is...
I see. So essentially this is just yet another convoluted gaggle screw of an explanation for why we're not flying off the Earth that's spinning through space then, when it's a non-force force that you can think of as a force because of the equivalence principle. How very quaint. Wrong. It's not going to be explained to me in a pseudo-geometry because that's not physical reality, Sabine, is it?
pushing on you. But you can't tell this apart from...
Was that the dulcet tones of Brian?
Yeah. Einstein doesn't say why there's a force upward. Not a force, but an acceleration upward. This is the thing. I've heard several different people who are PhD level who have given different stories as to why you have an upward accelerating Earth underneath your feet. But the only one that even really matches what Einstein was talking about is that it's just relative. In other words, from your reference frame, you can't, like, his attitude was, you can't determine whether the man is falling or the Earth is coming up to meet him. Because this came from when he witnessed a guy falling off a roof. And that's what that's about. Like, there isn't a force causing him to fall. That's true within his general relativity. There is no force. Gravity is not a force. But this part here, his equivalence principle, is talking about how you can't just by viewing it show, like, prove just by viewing it, the Earth coming up to meet the object or the man falling off the roof is, you know, the same thing as him falling down because he has weight. If you understand what I mean. Like, she said that the pressure within the planet, this is because I've watched this, I said this to QE a week ago, and he was laughing his ass off at it. The pressure within the planet, there's a constant pressure, and I know you went through it yesterday, where she says there's a constant pressure, and if that wasn't there, the world would collapse in on itself. It's like, no, her globe would collapse in on itself. The world doesn't have that problem. You know what I mean? So she's just trying to come up with, like, she has to accept, she's accepting gravity is not a force. That's what's going on there. We've heard that recently with her when she said that she amended, that she said she was wrong when she said that the air pressure gradient is caused by a gravity gradient. she's like, no, gravity is not a force, so it's not caused by that. You know, they're all accepting that now, the higher echelons, because, you know, I'm sure vacuum weights, things like that, they can't get past those things, so they have to accept it. But what she's after been doing is trying to make up an upward acceleration that just doesn't exist. The whole lot is, like, how would you debunk that?
Stop. That's the point. She's just making up something that doesn't exist. In order for this to work, they've just got to make it up. Why am I accepting that I am subject to a force when I'm at zero? Well, because you wouldn't know if you were. That's their explanation. You wouldn't know if you were, therefore you are.
I've got a problem with that, guys. This is another part of the misrepresentation. So it's claimed you wouldn't know if you were, but actually look at the caveats to make that statement, even that Einstein does. You wouldn't know for very long as all you did were looking at it. If you use any of your other senses, this equivalence falls apart. Yeah, it's not equivalent. It's a magic trick which is then described mathematically. But even within that, they accept that this is only a temporary thing where you could have the equivalence. And if you use any other senses, you are able to distinguish. Why it then rolls into the mathematics of proving things, I don't know. But from what I've read early on, even by Einstein, that's an accepted part of this equivalence, is that it's only a temporary thing if you limit your senses.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we accept that, we wouldn't know. Therefore, not knowing means that I can justify there being a force where you don't feel one. But that's automatically in place, and the gravity bending space-time is an explanation for why you wouldn't know that there's a force when there is a force that you can think of as a force, but it's not actually a force. I'm pretty clear about the rhetoric.
Yeah. But what it is, what they're actually claiming, what Einstein is saying, like when they say there's no force, in other words, what's actually being said is there is no explanation in Einstein's general relativity for why things fall other than relatively, from a relative point of view, you might view something falling, but the Earth could be just as easily coming up the meter. Just the thing about it, it's debunked by the same thing that debunked the upward moving Earth. The same thing debunked both of them, because their upward moving Earth idea comes from Einstein, and it's weighing scales. Weight doesn't exist within his paradigm, right? Now, how does a weighing scales work? It requires something stationary and solid underneath it, and then a force down on top of it. If the Earth was moving up and you would know weight, then me, you, Adam, Eli, Paul, everyone here would stand on weighing scales, and the scales would show the exact same figure. None of us would have different weights.
What about the clouds?
Because we couldn't have.
What about the clouds? You say it's representative in the same debunking as an upward rising Earther would experience. Well, Dal came here, and when he got to the clouds, his response was, "Never mind the clouds."
Yeah, well, Einstein wouldn't be so stupid as to end up having to answer questions about clouds. Do you know what I mean? Because Einstein would be speaking in such riddles, or if you look at any of the times he seemed to be interviewed, he sits there and says hardly nothing. Do you know what I mean? Because he knows. He was wise. He knew how to make up rubbish and also how to sit there and say absolutely nothing when he's being interviewed. You know what I mean? Or hardly be interviewed at all. You know what I mean? What did he ever do? He turned up at places where people were probably total awe of him and no one questioned him.
From
you know
being accelerated.
Yes, I agree.
In the absence of gravity in a flat space-time. Imagine, for example, you're falling into a black hole. No, I don't mean...
So imagine we're in a pseudo-Riemannian fourth-dimensional space-time concept described by Einstein so that you can visualize this working. There's the bait and switch complete. Now we're in pseudo-geometry. Imagine you're in a black hole, you say. Why? I can't imagine that I'm in a fourth-dimensional pseudo-Riemannian space-time dimension because one such thing does not exist. But I'm going to imagine myself being there. What, so I'm right in the middle of pseudo-geometry that you're going to explain this away in that doesn't in any way comport with reality? This is a really easy debunk when we're into Einstein, aren't we? What's it called again? Pseudo-geometry. geometry. Why would Einstein call it pseudo-geometry? That's because it's not real. Pseudo means sham, fake, not real. But that's why we're going to explain it in the pseudo-geometry. Yeah, even Einstein knew where he couldn't get away with this blag, because there is no bent space-time. Time is not real. It's a concept. We use that concept to convey ideas to each other. The passage of our known existence in the universe may be described as time, but it's certainly not a reifiable dimension that we experience. No, but that's what has now completely happened. Or what has now been completed by her when she takes us into the pseudo-geometry.
I mean, YouTube recommendations, I mean a literal black hole. You're in a box.
Oh, so you have to confirm that you mean literally. No, there is no physical black holes. They're descriptions in Einstein's pseudo-geometry.
With your spring and without any rocket boosters and so on. The black hole curves space-time.
Does it? So now we're in this example, we've got a pseudo-geometry being bent as a physical, actual, literal thing. No, Sabine. Do you not know the difference between physics and maths? Yeah, is the clue not in the title, pseudo-geometry? No? Did you think that this is how we could conceptualize it? By imagining this world that Einstein wrote about in mathematics? No, I'm not prepared to do that because it's not real, Sabine. That's my main objection here, and it wins immediately against Einstein, because he's put it in the title. Pseudo-Riemannian force space-time. We're going to imagine that we're there, are we, like in Narnia? Oh, really? Akin to me saying, let's just imagine that the time dimension of Narnia is going to be squashed by the witch as she pulls a spring attached to the lamppost. The spring looks like it's extending, but really, the fabric of the time that is Narnia compresses. In fifth-dimensional reality, we can observe that no change occurs in the spring from our vantage. But when you're watching it, only experiencing the three-dimensionality of Narnia, it just looks like the spring stretching. Little did you know that the entire world contracts around the White Witch, because she cannot be subject to any force. But that's how you need to conceptualize this in Narnia, Sabine, just like we should do in the pseudo-geometry you're proposing we should do this in. I refuse. Now you can obviously go to Narnia with me. Perfectly reasonable parallel, right? What, it's not reasonable that you go to Narnia? Why not? I'm expected to go to pseudo-Riemannian force space-time to watch the geodesic bend? In my box, towed by a rocket? No, definitely not. My name is Nathan Oakley. I refuse to be abused by these heliocentric liars. I refuse to be taken to a place that is not real to explain away their farcical bull belief. I refuse.
And you can use the equations of Einstein's...
Oh, we can? What, Einstein's equations are physics and reality? No, they're not, Sabine. Perfect timing.
General relativity to calculate what?
Calculate? That sounds not very physical. That sounds like a description in a language when you calculate things. You know, calculations aren't physics. They're maths. Yeah, conceptual descriptional tool for explaining things. As opposed to physics. The physics of our reality isn't this, Sabine. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of you foisting this on people so that they get duped into conceptual worlds like Narnia. It's an outrage.
Happens. They'll tell you that if you get too close to the event horizon...
They'll tell you that, will they? Because of Einstein's equations, as opposed to an experience in physical reality. This is just a describing picture of a well. That line's going in a three-dimensional depiction on a two-dimensional screen of a well. This is not the bent fabric of the pseudo-geometry description in Einstein, because such thing doesn't exist and you can't show it. So what, you're going to con me by telling me that this is the fabric of space-time bending? It is not. Just like if you stretched out a little bit of rubber and put a ball in the middle. That's not fabric of space-time either. Neither's this. You're just lying. Telling us that what? It's, what was the word she used? Literally. It might be literal, but it certainly isn't physical. This is not bent fabric of space-time. If you're watching this, nodding and going, yeah, I understand, Sabine, yeah, when the fabric in the mathematics of the equations of Einstein, blah, 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 I can mentally put myself there. Yeah, what do you think you're looking at? Bent fabric? You think this is time? Is this what we're looking at? Time? Is this time? No! It's an outrage is what it is. I'm sick of it. We're just being duped with this crap. And I can exercise this absolute disdain when it comes to Einstein, especially when someone accepts their own bullshit rhetoric like Sabine does here, right? Yeah, as I keep saying, it's far harder to fight against a fundamentalist religious zealot with 109-year out-of-date rhetoric that there just is an automatically in place force that holds you to a water ball. No, definitely not. No. For us to accept that there's a non-force force that you can think of as a force, we must accept that this is time. And it isn't. It's not even a good visual representation of that concept that I can verbalise my existence in the known universe. That is definitely not the concept that I understood to be time. This is a equation in a mathematical reification, isn't it, Sabine? And you damn well know it. Well, I'm sick of it. I'm calling you out, Sabine. You're a fraud, a con. This is a shell game. And what you've just done is moved the shells around from 3-dimensionality to 4-dimensionality. And you hope nobody's going to notice as you move those shells around. I notice. And I'm calling you out as a fraud and a liar and a scumbag con artist. Because that's what this is. A con. She's not showing you a time dimension bent. She's lying to you. Please let her know. At Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. There's a link going by in the live stream chat right now.
You'll inevitably cross it, and then you'll end up in the singularity, which might not be there, but that's a different story.
It might not be there because it's taking place in a non-reality that isn't qualifiable in physical terms, so therefore you can pepper this with disclaimers like the thing I've just described as you experiencing might not be there. It isn't there. Go ahead, whoever that was from Discord.
I was just laughing, Nathan, but that's another story. We can't talk about that.
The point for today is that
what she
you're
did yesterday, isn't it?
As soon as it's her poker toe, she will always come up with a quippy little supposed semi-intelligent comment after she's got you to swallow the bullshit. Yeah? Just to distract it away from it so that bit of bullshit tastes sweeter. Yeah? She did it twice yesterday and it's the same thing there. This Event Horizon thing, wouldn't you believe that? But I will give you the disclaimer that there might not even be such a thing, but that's a different story. Now, carrying on, now you've accepted my bullshit because I've sweetened it up a little bit. Third time in this thing, that's her poker tell to me. When she knows she's lying herself and the thing she's premised, she knows honestly is bullshit, she has to have a little joke, quip, or distractor comment.
Ring won't budge because there's no force acting on you.
Go ahead, Brian. It's good stuff. You and Adam are on fire, Brian. Go ahead.
Sorry, something popped up on my phone. Yeah, what she actually said there a few minutes ago, sorry for the delay, was that when you get to the airport that doesn't exist, one dick may not be there to beat you.
Quick call to action for those of you who are watching. Thank you very much if you've gone over to Sabine Hossenfelder's video to let her know that Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. But please also share this show. So it'd be nice to get it to 100 people watching. Should really have a better thumbnail. I've just got the generic one on today's show, which might not help things. But nevertheless, I'll create a couple of thumbnails because we did cover this yesterday. And in the meantime, the only reason we've got 85 people watching, which is all right, is because you have shared the show. So there's a good chance the people scrolling by in the live stream chat that you're chatting with have only come because you put a link out there. Because sure as hell ain't any links going out from YouTube's point of view. So please share the show if you've not done so already.
Because gravity is not a force.
And a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us. Thank you very much for being here. Gravity is not a force.
This is what physicists mean by free fall in a gravitational field.
So we're falling, we're experiencing stuff, but we're going to call it zero. Yeah. Total.
There's no... Sorry.
Go on, Brian.
Sorry, Nathan. I when you said JA, I thought you were finished. There's no gravitational fields in general, especially in general relativity.
Hey,
Even
John?
QE would say that.
Correct. Hey, John?
It means there's no force acting on you, so
Very
you're
well,
not
very well.
accelerated. A zero-G flight is the closest you'll get to that on Earth, at least if you want to survive.
Called it. So 0. So falling out the sky, hurtling towards your death, 0. Yeah, why? Well, because when you're sitting down doing nothing, that's when you've got your 9.8 meters per second working on you as Earth moves up. I mean, obviously the bent geodesic in a fourth-dimensional space-time when you consider yourself in a box towed by a rocket dragged into a three-dimensional well that I show on screen and call time. You can experience this. I mean, there may not be an event horizon at the end of it. Ha 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 ha! Moving on.
The idea of a zero-G flight...
Sorry.
Okay, bro.
This is what she's about to go into here is Einstein's actual point. That when you're falling, you can't determine if you're falling or if the Earth is coming up to meet you. It's this ambiguity after the word wrong. I can't say it right now. It's ambiguous. Like that's what he's saying. So within his general relativity, weight does not exist. There is no weight. So weighing scales can't exist. Is what, you know, the fact that weighing scales, if weighing scales exist, Einstein was wrong. Weighing scales did exist, so Einstein was wrong. It's that simple. Because weighing scales could not work in his paradigm.
Flight is exactly Einstein's elevator experiment. That if you're in a box whose floor is not pushing on you, that's the plane, then you can't tell whether you're in outer space far away from any heavy objects where space-time is flat, or whether you're freely...
You hear the disclaimer? So you have to take your other senses away. And she does that where the floor is not pushing on you. So the thing that would be the determinant of why you feel the force is not actually happening. It's just a matter of you looking as a reference point with your surroundings. That's where the relativity can occur, only if you ignore your other senses.
Yes.
But she's qualified it again there.
This is how the trick works. You are sat on a train, and the train on the platform opposite starts pulling away. Now, as it pulls away, from your vantage point, you go, "Oh, I'm moving. Doesn't feel like I'm moving, but I can see I'm moving. The train next to you is moving." Now, what Einstein says is, in that scenario, if you had no other frame of reference, it would actually be the case that you could be moving and you wouldn't know the difference. It would seem exactly the same. Therefore, when you're sat on the train, you've actually got a force of pushing you. Now, we're going to call that at rest 0, you not moving. We're going to call that 1. We're going to say you got a force of 1 pushing you along because you couldn't tell the difference without any references with the other train moving next to you, whether you were moving or it was moving. So when you're not moving, we're going to call that 1. I mean, it does actually mean that when you're moving on the train, we're going to call that 0, but that's all good by everyone. Okay, so we're all clear. At rest, not doing a smegging thing, you're at 1. And when you're falling, hurtling towards the ground, you can't tell the difference between whether or not the ground's heading up to you or you're heading down to it. So we'll call that perfectly reasonably 0. We all clear? Just a moving of the scale. It's a pathetic shell game by a fraud. It's a failed magic trick. I say failed because we've called you out on it, magician.
Falling in a curved space-time. Physically, it's exactly the same. So the zero-G flight is indeed...
Let's just hear her say what I've just said, but with an upward inflection rather than abject disdain. So what I've just said, with disdain, she'll sound really happy about how factually accurate what I've just said with total disdain is.
a good simulation for outer space. And why is that? It's because gravity is not a force. In the plane, you're falling in a gravitational field, but there's no force acting on you.
See? So when you're falling, hurtling, you don't know any difference. There's basically zero. It's zero. Yeah? So when you're flying towards the ground in a parabolic maneuver and you and the plane are all falling at the same rate and you look around and everything's as it should be, other than you're floating and the plane itself is hurtling towards the ground, you can't tell the difference. So we're all good. We can call that zero. You're good. Because for this to work, we need there to be an automatically in place force that I'm not going to call a force in pseudo-Riemannian bent geodesics. That's the consequence of the always in effect force when you don't know there is one because you're at zero. But we're going to call that one. Everyone clear? We all clear? Good. You're a fraud. You're a con artist. This is a shell game. Yeah, you learned the shell game from Einstein and now you're peddling it. Great financial success to you. And for me pointing out the fraud, the con, yeah, I'll be suppressed. That's the world we live in. I just have to accept that. Please share the show if you value this information.
Now, I sometimes hear people say that zero G...
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. You were trying to get a word in, Adam. Go ahead.
I just want to link it back to yesterday's because I did that little bit of research. This is not just... This is done to maintain the paradigm. The whole of these accelerometers things, the way it's recalibrated, reset, and redefined, more importantly, is for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to maintain gravity, yeah, so that they can have this upward moving force at 9.8 when you're at rest. And I said, if you read the technical logs, even the techno geeks that have got no interest in ball earth, flat earth, they're saying this is stupid. It's nonsensical to be claiming that the accelerometer is giving a reading of naught whilst it's accelerating to the ground is contradictory to the definitions of acceleration. And therefore, and these are the techie guys putting this out, and they don't say it, but I'll reiterate the point. The only reason to redefine an acceleration as zero is to fit it in with a heliocentric Einsteinian paradigm.
Yeah, that's what I was furious about yesterday. I was just enraged about.
What? Reiterate it again if you don't mind.
To say falling is not an acceleration.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
It is stupid.
It's not stupid. It's necessary if you're going to pretend that when you're at rest, there's an upward force of 9.8 meters per second. That's how you have to rescale everything to be able to make that statement. And the consequence is, yeah, it's counterintuitive to everything, to the definition of acceleration, isn't it?
Yep. Look what's on screen. She's got a guy in the clouds with the words zero written on it. Like I say, I've been pointing out this moving of the scales for years. But that's all it is. It's a very simple magic trick.
Is a bad term because it suggests that there's no gravity. But of course, the curvature of space-time doesn't go away just because you sit in a plane.
So the reification of a description in a pseudo-geometry doesn't go away. You're a fraud. You're a con artist. You're deceiving your audience. As is the entire heliocentric world that we oppose. Because we know it's not the case. We know that the measurements and derivations of things like gravity come from a flat plane also. But you're going to tell us that based on a moving of the scale, that you haven't got a force and that's all cool. Almost 100 people watching. Massive thank you to all of you who shared the show.
And that's right, but zero G doesn't mean zero gravity. The G is the local acceleration that you experience if you are at rest.
Like a local acceleration, as in like a local force that you experience when you're not doing anything. I don't accept this double speak and it's easy to pull apart.
So she just said zero G is when you're accelerating downwards.
Yeah. Zero G when you're accelerating. Correct. It's total double speak.
In the gravitational field. If you are...
But as a result of the pseudo-geometry, we have covered this quite concisely already, Adam. I'm just getting exasperated for the second time over the same thing.
On the Earth's surface, that acceleration is roughly 9.8 meters per square second, as you probably all learned in kindergarten. Though, strictly speaking, this gravitational acceleration isn't constant.
Is per square second the same? Does that not alter it slightly?
No.
A second per second. A square second. No, that does work. Okay, fine.
The acceleration that you experience on the surface of Earth drops if you go to higher altitudes, and it also slightly depends on what the ground is made of. This is why measuring this acceleration tells you something about the composition.
What acceleration are we measuring? I'm slightly lost in the doublespeak now. Wasn't
Yeah,
expecting.
because we were measuring it. If we drop it at different rates in different areas, she's saying it falls at a different rate, but that rate she's just redefined as a zero acceleration. And you can see that the varies from zero acceleration because it's made a different. This is affirming the consequent. If I get a different drop rate, then I know that the thickness to the center of the Earth is different to where I got a different drop rate there. Just fallacy again.
But then again, it can't be an affirmative consequent because she already said that falling is zero acceleration. I hate her.
The different rate of zero to prove that you've got more or less ground underneath you to give you a different force of gravity that's not a force, to give you a different rate of fall, which on their scale is zero anyway.
But the different rate of fall, which is on the scale zero, varies in the acceleration that it isn't because it isn't a force. Correct?
Yeah, so I think basically if something was falling at 9.9 meters per second, it'd actually be traveling at -1 meters per second squared or accelerated, yeah? Because that's what the scale does to it, isn't it?
Yeah, precisely. It's absurd. It's much easier to pull apart Einstein. Wouldn't you agree, Adam? I've said this 3 times on the show. I'm going to say it once more time now. When you're just dealing with a religious fundamentalist zealot with a belief that there's a force holding them to the ball, that is very difficult to overcome. Now, you can point out that that has been out of date for 109 years. It won't make any difference. It's a fundamentalist religious zealot belief in a force. Now, when you've got someone who says, it's not really a force, we just retrim the scale and say that not moving is 1 and moving is 0. You can just laugh at it. It's much easier to pull apart. That's why they need the pseudo-Riemannian fourth space bent geodesics in space-time to make it complicated. So that you don't just whistle past, hopefully, you just whistle past the I'm just moving a scale and saying you're moving when you're not moving. Travelling without moving, as Jamiroquai would put it. Shout out to Richard G. Says, welcome to High. Oh, he's joined as a member. Thank you very much for joining as a member, Richard. Really appreciate it.
Of Earth's mantle, but I digress.
Sorry, Adam, my timing is a little bit off. It'll improve next week.
I was paused there. I would agree. It's a shed load here because you've got nothing to actually worry about. All you've got is somebody's religious beliefs. There's nothing in reality that they can cite, that even matches it. Like I say, you've even got the most basic contradiction that from their fundamentalist view, when something's falling, it's not accelerating. That's how twisted their doctrines become, or how much they have to twist reality to match with their doctrine, which, as I say, is the easiest thing to destroy. Newton's a lot harder, because it's based in reality, at least. It's all derived from reality. This is just all moved into mathematics with a fourth dimension that, as hard as you try, whoever you're talking to, it's impossible to conceptualize or even imagine, because the way in which they're using time is not how we experience time. They've now turned it into something substantive,
a fabric,
bendable.
Yeah. A three-dimensional fabric.
Adam, you're a smart guy, and you believed this for how many years? They did a great job brainwashing people, because we can look at it now and say, how can anybody believe this nonsense? But yet we all did.
Because we were all brainwashed into the Newtonian aspect. That's why there's a two-sided gravitational coin that's offered to you. The first side you've experienced all the way up to higher education. And then in higher education, they decry it and tell you that it's a bent pseudo-Riemannian force space-time and teach you about the maths. Hoping that you'll whistle past the fact that you've got to accept this arbitrary moving of the scale that says you're moving when you are not. And that moving towards the ground because of the equivalence principle means that you wouldn't know any difference between the ground hurtling up towards you and you hurtling down towards the ground. Therefore, it's acceptable to say that hurtling towards the ground is actually 0 and sitting still is actually 1. G.
Yeah, but you never gave this a second thought. Did anybody give it a second thought? Adam, did you even think about it before you became a flat earther, is what I'm asking.
Well, yes, me and Chocolate both often give you a rendition of our disdain or our confusion as kids when we were told about gravity, and then you go home and do the example they've given you. I don't know if Chocolate's example came with it happening in the class. It didn't for me. I went home after the fact and swung the bucket around. Hang on a second. Everything will fly off it. This doesn't make any sense. And for Chocolate and I, we put that on the back burner from that point to this. And it's one of those million things that's flashing before your brain when you hear Math Powerland say Earth's flat. You're like, oh yeah, that never made any sense. We'd fly off the spinning water ball. Now, did I put it into the forefront of my mind throughout my education? No, nobody did. It doesn't mean that lots of people didn't question it when they first heard it. Some people go, oh, it's too complicated for me to understand, and then just don't worry about it. I'm being told by someone smarter, the teacher, that it does work. So I'll just accept that. So long as I can give a rendition back on a paper at the end of the year, then I'll be all right. It's not for me to worry my precious little head about whether or not I understand the notion of a non-force force that you can think of as a force that's actually a bent geodesic in space-time that I don't even know about yet because I'm being taught about Newtonian masses that attract masses because of Cavendish experiments, where we show that a mass, like with a gas, attracts another mass, like a gas, that doesn't do that. Hence, it changed 109 years ago, because their basis in physical reality with a contraption known as Cavendish doesn't comport with physical reality, even though that claim has a basis in physical reality, as Adam just pointed out. It's far harder to undo a zealot belief in something that isn't true and can be demonstrated to not be true in reality. Now, if that's part of your globe rhetoric, that needs alteration. Enter Einstein with pseudo-geometry. Now, it's not really a force, it's okay, it's all good. Nothing in physics to see here, it's all in the geometry of spent space-time, so don't worry about looking for anything in physics. It's all here in the maths. What's that? Oh, yeah, we're moving up. What? Yeah, just accept it. You don't? Oh, well, let me explain the equivalence principle, then you will. You wouldn't know any different. Just accept it. Meanwhile, bent space-time. Let's get on to black holes and event horizons that may or may not be there, because they're very exciting.
It's an appeal to the ego component, Neil. So I would imagine, and certainly as a Doctor Who fan, yeah, you use your imagination here. Look at and you kind of concede that you can't conceptualize it, but as you said, smarter people than I have, and they've got the maths to prove it. Now, at that young level, there is an acceptance of authority, yeah? Because you're not challenging it, you're just figuring, I clearly don't know it. And if you can bullshit your way around it, you feel dead clever, which is what theoretical physicists are doing. But comes back to the main point. Which would you prefer? Well, I prefer taking apart Einstein because it is not based in reality. It is purely contradictory theory to hold together a ball. So yeah, I prefer tackling Einstein because Newton it's all his numbers are pulled from dropping things and measuring that. Yeah, so it's hard to undo the reality of his concepts because they're pulled. Whereas if you look, so his maths is solid. If you see what I mean, it's reflective of reality. It's derived from reality. Whereas Einstein isn't. They invent a new dimension to try and explain what we experience in reality. It's something that we can't even demonstrate or, in this case, even truly conceptualize, Neil.
Yeah, and then all you then have is then a parallel being drawn by further observations that are characterized within Einstein's maths, like black holes. Here's black holes, we found them, proving that there is pseudo-force-based geometry. That's how the trick then works moving forward. The more affirmation you have of things that were predicted in the Einstein mathematics that you can compare to lights in the sky, with the justification for how they are the thing that Einstein had formerly described, then you've got a justification for there being a fourth-dimensional pseudo-geometry that you can't really experience. But look, you can look at it, you can see how the lights and their massive, massive size in the space-time dimension as it evolves through our progression of time is visible. Look, check it out. See this dot? That's an event horizon. Is it? Yeah. And that is predicted, sounds scientific, in Einstein. Well, there we got the prediction, now we've got the observation, pseudo-geometry confirmed. What's that you say? How does pseudo-geometry actually affect our existence? Well, it doesn't in any way, shape or form. It's a description in maths. But do you accept that the world is travelling up? What do you mean what happens in Australia? If we're going to describe it from Australia, Earth's moving up from Australia. Fine. It's all relative to your position describable from that location. We're moving up in Australia. Fine. But you accept that we're moving up, right? That's therefore 1G. Yeah? You got that? I mean, the bent space-time doesn't create a force. It creates a bent geodesic. Don't worry your stupid little head about what that means. You just accept that we're moving up, regardless of where we are, because we're only going to describe it from that particular location at that particular time when we say that the Earth is moving up to create a force to keep you on the ball, and the bent geodesic isn't a force, and there's nothing in reality to go and confirm that it would be. Don't need to. And you don't understand the geometry, so don't worry your precious little head about it. Are we all clear?
The bent geodesic would be turning the flat non-inertial plane traveling upwards into a ball because of mass of the ball.
Good point. So in order to describe the acceleration, non-force force, think of it as zero moving the scale, you're going to describe it with respect to a plane of reference. And in their plane of reference, they describe it with respect to the flat plane of the space. I've forgotten what they described it. She did have it dropped in there.
She said that at the start. She said, I'm going to take a piece of flat space-time.
Correct.
Yeah?
So, exactly, flat space-time, sorry. So when she's describing it, it's because they've got to have some reference to the horizontal. Precisely, John. The way they then get around the fact that they've got to have a ball-shaped world revolving around the sun in a heliocentric paradigm, they need a geodesic to bend the flat plane of reference that they start with. Hence, you end up with bent geodesics. Spot on. Good point to drop it in to demonstrate your exemplary understanding of it also, John. Kudos. And Adam, as we're all getting props, because I'll be accused of favouritism by Neil later on.
By the way, this video comes with a quiz.
Go on, John. No?
That was me, Nathan. Sorry. That was me. Sorry. I was trying to get to I had a cat. My kitten was trying to attack me while I was trying to get to the mute button. Yeah, it's total nonsense because what happened, like yesterday when she held out the accelerometer, I say accelerometers always show an upward acceleration. Right? Now, they are calibrated to 9.81 meters per second square. They're calibrated to that, digital ones. So that may be why they're showing that. Or it could be convection. Do you know what I mean? Because let's be honest, these people... Springs. Not in the ones she's talking about. She's not talking about ones with springs.
No, but okay. Fundamentally, that's what they are. They're just micro springs. Yeah. But that still has, this is what I'm saying. The premise of this is weight, okay, and relative density disequilibrium. So if you've got that tiny little, I'm going to keep calling it a spring because fundamentally that's what you're measuring. You vibrate that, and it's that vibration that you're detecting. Yeah. Well, if I orientate it in a certain way, its weight, because of RDD, will have an effect on the device, which is why the device needs calibrating. Yeah. Because the tiny little thing, that tiny little spring, does have weight in the real world, even if it's teeny weeny in a teeny weeny little box. Yeah. Still has reality affecting it. Yeah. So it has to be calibrated. Yeah. So that you know when it is at rest and nothing's there, that's zero. Nothing's moving. But where the position of the spring will be slightly, based on its weight, it will be moved slightly. Now that is what you set as zero because it's not moving. But do you then tell the accelerometer to tell you that that's actually 9.8 up?
Exactly. And that 9.8 up is 1G.
But I'm just saying, with the ones, just because this is something that has happened over and over again with her opposition. Instead of looking at the natural world and what could be causing something, they go straight to whatever belief system they have as being the cause. My point being is that the accelerometers that she's talking about, which use the piezoelectric effect. Adam might know what that is, which is basically it's these crystals that register any changes in motion, basically, right? They're very sensitive crystals, right? But the whole point of it is to make it extra sensitive. Now, that would mean if it's as sensitive as it's claimed to be, then an accelerometer in someone's hand would register any convection of the air, any movement of the air, which isn't the down. Do you know what I mean? Like, down is only part of the convection. You're going to have the up, especially close to the surface of Earth, where the air is at its warmest. You'll have a lot of rising air. So it could just be purely convection that this little device is detecting. Like, it may not even be the fact that they do calibrate them to 9.81 meters per second squared up. They do this, so it's probably just that. But they could make the mistake in thinking it's my belief, as opposed to it just being convection, because they do that on a regular basis. But what was debunked her yesterday was she said, I can feel this, as she almost said, the weight of this on my hand, completely debunking everything to do with Einstein and everything, her whole video, right? Debunking the whole lot. The fact that the thing has a pressure on her hand means that you're not going up. You know what I mean? It can't be. It's impossible for that thing to put pressure on your hand, because it's impossible for it to have weight within the paradigm your video is based on. You know, the whole thing is a joke.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
I am.
Okay.
Because you're not addressed with the surface of Earth. That's why it feels like free fall. Of course, it's not exactly zero, because you always move around somewhat that way or this way, or if you're rowing because you're doing CPR.
Now she's altered the frame of reference that she's describing things in to make it seem like, well, you're only moving a little bit this way. So if we take the picture that's on screen, right, if this guy goes and grabs this net, you see my mouse? There's a netting over here. Let's just say that this distance is 1 meter, and he rotates around and then grabs the net. She's saying, well, he's only moved a little bit. He's you know, it took him 2 or 3 seconds to rotate, another second to get across and grab the net. He's only moved 1 meter. Meanwhile, they have descended 5,000 feet for that to occur. Yeah? No, he's zero. He's only moved a little bit. He's only a little bit off zero as he moves towards the net. Yeah, he's descended 5,000 feet in that time. Just going to call that a little bit? Yeah, because we need to call that a little bit while he's falling and hurtling towards the ground with a pilot that's highly skilled, that's been trained to do this maneuver so he doesn't kill them all if he gets a tiny bit of it wrong. Yeah. We'll ignore that. He's only moving a little bit, isn't he, Adam?
No, Nathan. He's not actually going down. The Earth is moving up. Like, the plane is just standing still when that happens.
Of course, I knew you kept you around for a reason. Absolutely, Arwin. My bad. Obviously, the equivalence principle would suggest that, yeah, they are experiencing free fall with a highly skilled parabolic trained maneuver being done by a skilled pilot. But you wouldn't know the difference if the ground was hurling up to you or the plane was hurling down towards it, so it's really still zero. Right, Arwin, right. So as long as we accept that, we don't need to know anything about geodesics in space-time. We just need to accept that one little shift of the scale and everything's cushy.
Yeah, but it's pretty close to zero. So I'd say 0 G.
Just ignoring the descent towards Earth at a vast rate, it's pretty much zero.
Is a good description. Same thing on the ISS. Okay, but I can see your
What? Same thing on the ISS? No, that's complete fraud. No, we may experience a light in the sky that has been named the ISS, but we also get given a stage show of men on high wire, dangling around and having harness slips and things of that nature. They are liars. All of them are complete frauds. Their only purpose and being is to deceive the world with lies. They know they're not in a spaceship flying around in an orbital motion derived from a flat plane measurement, because that thing doesn't exist. They're not in Narnia. There is no orbital motion. There is no flying around at a 0g when you move the scale, because basically falling in a perpetual sphere-like motion because of a description by Keplerian orbital motion means that they're essentially in Superman motion the entire time when they claim to be on a line in the sky. They're not. They're liars. Every single astronaut ever to have claimed to be on the ISS is a liar. They are all frauds. They cannot travel to an area of volume called outer space where the ISS is claimed to reside and look down upon the high-pressure gas not expanding into the sky vacuum they're falling around the Earth in. That's a complete lie. Every astronaut is a liar.
So you're saying the people that came to my church, an astronaut, one of the last ones to, I think, orbit the moon, was lying to me?
Yes,
From
without
the pulpit?
doubt. If he was in a church and before God lying to the congregation about falling in a Keplerian derivation of a flat Earth measurement to the stars, claimed to be a sphere Earth Superman trick, he is going to burn in hell, Neil.
Yeah, if he had dipped his finger in holy water, it would have started smoking.
Correct. Yes, Neil, that man is a liar, and he knows it.
Still confused because you learned that acceleration is a...
100 and... Well, was 105, now 101 people watching. Brilliant, 102. Hovering around the 100 people mark, which is fantastic. Please share the show, and a very warm welcome to all of you who have clicked those links that the people who I called to action about half an hour ago have sent out there into the great unknown that is YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Bebo and MySpace, so that you can all congregate on this show right now. 105 people watching. Really, really, really grateful to all of you who shared, but more importantly, a very warm welcome to all of you who've just joined us. Now, moving into the new year, we're not going to get an actual New Year show because it's over the weekend. I will release some shows that have been popular over the last 2 or 3 weeks during that period, but the next show will be in 2024. Fantastic stuff. So it'd be good to get an even larger audience while we're here. So massive thanks again to all of you who shared the show, and welcome who've clicked on the links.
change in velocity. And if you're not changing velocity, you're just standing on Earth. How can you be accelerated? Well,
you're not. You're just standing there.
The entire point of Einstein's theory of relativity is that velocity is not absolute. What you mean if you say you're not changing velocity is that you're not moving relative to the surface of Earth. But this doesn't mean you have zero velocity, because that's...
So you're not moving because what? We are moving. Like in your plane, when you describe not moving or moving a little bit, you're actually moving because you are demonstrably hurtling towards Earth. You just didn't mention that fact. But now, given that you wouldn't notice that fact you didn't mention, that you are most assuredly hurtling towards Earth, you're now saying that while you're sat still, the equivalence principle given to you by Einstein would suggest that you are in fact moving, when you wouldn't realise it. No.
That's a meaningless statement. It just means you're not moving relative to something else that accelerated the same way, which is the surface of Earth.
But when you say the same way, you mean up? Oh, what about the Australian guy, antipodal from this position that you're describing here? Is he also moving up? So everything's moving up. Oh, no, this is counteracted by the pressure that you just decided to arbitrarily ascribe and tell us to beg the question of when you came to this description of a non-force force that we can think of as a force but isn't really a force because it's a bent geodesic in a space-time dimension that we don't experience, but ultimately when we move the scale of not moving to 1 and describe falling as 0, then we have a force that's not a force that takes me into a shell game that takes you to a place that you can't understand. Yeah, it's all very convoluted, but it still leaves you being a fraud and all of the astronauts that you appeal to being liars. Fact.
You can, however, return to talking about Newtonian gravity by reading...
Can we? Why? It's been superseded by this garbage that we've just unpicked 108 years ago, going on for 109 years ago. But what, we can just refer to it anyway? No, mass doesn't attract mass. Gas doesn't do that. It has elastic collisions. If it collides with anything, it immediately bounces off it with the same velocity it bounced on it. So no, that's not attraction. I would describe that very much as non-attraction. Even if they do come in proximity with each other, they don't attract. They bounce off.
Yeah, but you can still talk about it, right? She didn't say it was that, but You can still talk about it to make it more convoluted and confusing.
Oh,
So you
I
keep mixing
see.
it up.
Even though it's not a force and mass doesn't attract mass, and that's been thoroughly debunked, and the experimentation that's been claimed to be proving it has been exposed as complete pseudoscience, we can still talk about it. No, I don't accept that, Sabine. Seems like your con has got second arm to it. That this superseding of a physical debunkable claim by Newton, which it wasn't, name only, is now automatically referable to also. No. No. Superseded 108 years ago by a bent geodesic in a space-time dimension that has no physicality to refer to. And mass doesn't attract mass. So definitely not, Sabine. What an outrage. If the new con don't work, you can always refer to the old con, is how I will summarise this statement.
Defining what you mean by no acceleration.
Sorry, Owen.
Doesn't mean that you can't actually go and live in it.
Start that statement again. I started the video. My bad.
Sorry.
One more time, Owen. One more time.
Oh, I was just saying, just because the house needs to be condemned and is unlivable and there's cracks everywhere, it's about to crash in on itself, doesn't mean that you can't move in there, right?
It's worse than that. It's worse than that. Just because the hypothetical house in hypothetical Narnia, backed by hypothetical lines that don't exist, has been condemned by the hypothetical council in Narnia, you can still live in it.
That's a bit too far, Nathan.
That's what they're doing. That's a direct parallel to what they are doing.
Acceleration. In general relativity, as we've just seen, you are accelerated if you don't move relative to the surface of Earth.
So, in other words, it completely contradicts Einstein. I see.
Say, because you stand on top of a building. If you jump and fall,
Is she about to launch into how this will be acceleration? Because it says not accelerated on the diagram.
not accelerated.
She mentions
Why
Newton
do they
again,
always
please.
bring it back to jumping off a building? I mean, how many times do you need to give that very specific example every time you explain this? This is very suspicious.
Death cell.
Could you go back to where she brings Newton in again? Just maybe 10 seconds or something.
Talking about Newtonian gravity by redefining what you mean by no acceleration. In general relativity, as we've just seen, you are accelerated if you don't move relative to the surface of Earth, say because you stand on top of a building. If you jump and fall, you're not accelerated because there's no force acting on you.
You can't fall then. This is the thing. This is the thing, right? Within general relativity, right, there is only an up, right? There's no falling down, there's no forces down, there's no weight. This is why I keep bringing up the weight scales. It means that nothing can have weight. It means the only force that the weight scales, like even at that, I was even actually wrong. I forgot actually. I was even wrong to even mention weight scales, because if the only force is up, then me standing on the scales will read 0. You standing on the scales, Nathan, will read 0. A car on the scales will read 0. Because there is no down. Weight scales are designed so you have a stationary solid base underneath the scales, a level base, and you then stand on the scales, and how much down, right, the weight down force, which is your weight, you can place on the scales, is read by the scales. But within that paradigm, everybody will weigh the same, which is 0. Everything will be 0. There is no down. Just like with the upward moving earth hours, there is no down. So it's impossible for a weighing scale to ever exist.
I don't know about that, Brian. Maybe if you just do what Sabine says and like jump off a building, then maybe you can actually prove her right instead of just pointing out all these facts.
Well, it wouldn't matter, because even if you hit the scales at the base, let's say you jumped off and you hit the scales at the base, then that scales won't go down because you don't have weight. This is the thing. If you landed on that scales and you're hopping off the ground from jumping off a 20-story building, what she's trying to say is that if you landed on that scales, it would show 0 because you don't have weight. So you don't have any just 1 second, John. You don't have any resistance whatsoever. You have no inertia. You know what I mean? You don't have weight, you have no inertia. So what should happen to you, if anything, is that when you land on the ground, you should be sent off straight back up, like a basketball. Except for a basketball that doesn't come back down. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, but I'm sure that when you land on that scale after having jumped off a building, the scale for just a brief half a second is going to register like 1,000 pounds before
it can't. You don't have any. It can't, because you need to put pressure on the spring, which you can't do because you don't have weight.
If you jump down, there's going to be a lot of pressure on that spring, is what I'm saying.
Not within that paradigm, Armin. See, you're mixing up reality with that paradigm. With that paradigm, there is no weight. So you can't put pressure down on the scales. No matter if you jump from 1,000 feet.
I know you can think of it like that. I'm just saying that when you actually jump or whatever, drop something on the scale, it's going to register more pressure for a bit. That's just a fact. Whatever.
Yeah, in reality.
That's to be debatable, right?
No, but in reality, yeah, not in that paradigm. In that paradigm, no. In that paradigm, no. You can jump 1,000 feet off a building and land on a big scales, a really super sensitive scales, and you land on it and it'll read 0. Because you don't have weight within that paradigm. You should technically just be sent straight back up because you have no inertia. You have no weight, no resistance.
Yeah, Del didn't understand it either. Remember when Del wasn't understanding?
Oh, he understood it all right. Come on.
Where's my blue tag?
Say again. Was that Flatsy? No? I thought I had something from Discord. Carry on, Brian.
No, what I was...
Go on, John.
What I was going to say is the thing with the accelerometer is if it's registering 9.8 meters per second acceleration and you jump off a building, it's not going to change if there's no acceleration. So she's basically claimed that if you throw an accelerometer off a building, it's not going to measure any change in acceleration. And that's just stupid.
That's what Brian's saying. But Arwen's then combating that with what could hypothetically happen, and Brian saying, yeah, that's what would happen in reality. That's not what she's trying to describe, and how it's contradicted when you actually toss it off the building. A couple of quick shout outs.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of super chats. Let me just do the couple of super chats that we've had. 1 second, Brian. So shout out to, we'll do Retro Bill first. This is the one that just super chatted, and I can actually put it up on screen. Is there anyone makes me want to jump from a building? If there's anyone that makes me want to jump from a building, it's Sabine. Okay, well, thank you very much for the super chat, Retro Bill. I don't think I want to descend into their death cell and encouragement of suicide as they do with these examples, but I appreciate the sentiment, and obviously I appreciate the support. Really appreciate it. In fact, 117 people watching. Woohoo! Very warm welcome to you all. Really appreciate all of those you smash that share button. Please share the show if you've not done so already. And indeed, please let Sabine Hossenfelder know that we have responded to a video with a little comment that says, at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. Also, Happy New Year's, says Himsake. Thank you also for the super chat. I did put it up on screen, we just didn't get a chance to say it because I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, Himsake. But I also really appreciate your support, so thank you very much for the super chats. Brian, is there something else you wanted to go on to, or Arwen, or John? If not, I will continue with the video.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I have references from surveying and aerospace that state that accelerometers require an inertial frame of reference. Now, inertial means it's not moving. It's not rotating, it's not going up, and it's not falling down. It's not moving. Because when they use accelerometers within surveying and within aerospace, I'll just give the aerospace example, they're using 3 accelerometers, and for that they need to have 3 inertial frames of reference. And to create those frames of reference, they use ring laser gyros, which create those frames of reference. So for roll, pitch, and yaw of an airplane. So there's no, like, those 3 accelerometers, when they're using when they're creating the 3 inertial frames with an airplane, it's for the inertial navigation system that we went through before. that Adam and me were talking about. We had the PDF on it. They must create 3 inertial frames of reference in those 3 different the word is not coming to me. Those 3 different scenarios, just the wrong word. And they must create that inertial frame of reference for the accelerometers to work right, so they can then determine the route that the plane is taking or has taken. So if you lose all radio and GPS and all this, you can still fly to your destination, as it's all after being recorded by the. You'll know exactly where you are, in other words, because it has been recorded. Your route has been recorded by the accelerometer. Now that can't work if the accelerometers are always trying to register an up. Well, you can't. How can they need an inertial frame of reference to work when they're always trying to register an up? It's complete nonsense. That's all it is. The point I'm making is that when they use accelerometers in the real world, they require an inertial frame of reference to use them. You understand?
Yep. Super chat, by the way, Nathan.
Flatsy is here, Arwin. How dare you?
There.
Yeah, Flatsy's here. She normally shouts out super chats when they come. It's not Ballbusters, though, so I'm not expecting that of you, Flatsy. Anyway, shout out to Brian Bender, who says, Nathan, can you give her a...
said something...
Go on, Flatsy.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was like, I said something about me earlier, but I was eating. And I'm seeing your super chats, but I don't know. I'm eating.
Fair enough. Says Nathan, can you give a rebuttal for ring laser gyros? ? Also, would you be willing to come on our podcast and talk about flat Earth? I have written a book on FE. Yeah, absolutely. Drop me an email, Brian, Nathan Oakley 1980 at AOL.com. Just drop me an email. We'll arrange it. Also, can I respond to, don't have to super chat then to give me the answer to this question. What about ring laser gyros? When you say refute ring laser gyros, there's nothing wrong with ring laser gyros, is there? What am I refuting? But thank you for the super chat.
As long as they're not drifting.
Faulty. He didn't say faulty. Hold on. He didn't say faulty ring laser gyros, did he?
No, well, that's my point. So as long as they're not drifting, i.e. they're faulty, yeah, then there's no issue with ring laser gyros, yeah. That's why aeroplanes have them. They're very useful for maintaining the same orientation from where you took off from. Yeah. However, if you were to have one that was giving variations, i.e. an indicator that it was faulty, but you were to infer a whole new worldview based on those, that's where the issue is.
And
Exactly,
also,
Hold on. I want to, or when you're like in need of some kind of Coriolis deviating mechanism for, say, a gyroscope, right? Remember when they claimed the pendulous veins was there to correct for Coriolis deviation? We had to like figure out what it was to disprove that. They did that. Remember?
well, if he's a flat earther, more than likely he's talking about an Ethereum claim. But you're talking about with any kind of light gyro measuring diffraction patterns, particle distributions. So if you're an Ethereum, you have to deny that particles exist. For ring laser gyros to work, light must be a particle.
Well, the thing about it is as I just stated, for the inertial navigation system of an airplane and how airplanes use ring laser gyros, the ring laser gyros, that was the result for Adam orientation. They create 3 inertial orientation planes. So they create 3 frames of reference that hold that same frame of reference. How can a ring laser gyro hold a horizontal frame of reference, but also be drifting? It can't. How can it hold a vertical frame of reference and also be drifting? It can't. You know what I mean?
You've also got the added complexity, Brian, and within their claim of that they've derived from the faulty gyro is that the rate of rotation also changes with altitude. Now, throw that bag of spanners into an aeroplane, which is going to have varying altitudes. think of the complexity of trying to use something that's trying to keep you stable when it's got to figure out what altitude you are and the rate of change of the device to then keep you straight. It's a nonsense. It's not how gyros work. Gyros, be mechanical or like you, work by providing stability. Yeah, they stay the same. Yeah, particularly your originals, they stay fixed in free space. Yeah, that's their purpose. Yeah, is to not be affected by altitude, by things, so that you have a constant reference, not a constant thing that's changing at different rates based on your height. That would make it useless, wouldn't it?
Well, you'd need one that isn't broken to see how much the broken one would deviate because of ether.
Ether?
Well, I don't know if this man, 1 second, Nathan. I don't know if this man who has just spoken to Nathan is a flat earther or a heliocentrist, or like if they're if he's a flat earther who's an Ethereum, or if he's a heliocentrist. It doesn't matter, because they're all wrong. Because when that pilot looks at their instrumentation, when he or she looks at their instrumentation, right, if those gyros are not doing what they're supposed to do, then when they think that the plane is pitched a certain way, or its yaw is a certain way, or whichever, well, if they think that if they have the references for pitch, roll, and yaw, and those references are wrong because the gyros are drifting all over the place, then there's going to be serious consequences for that. It would be on the news. It's called an air crash. You know what I mean? It's just nonsense. They don't do that. The whole point of them, as Adam just stated, is to stay inertial. That's the point of them. They need them to be inertial for the inertial navigation system. Inertial for the accelerometers. They need them to create those 3 inertial planes or frames of reference. It's just total nonsense. So there's nothing to refute when it comes to the ring laser gyro. The only people that need to refute something is the people who are claiming that they're moving, that are drifting all over the place.
Yeah, but that's what's so brilliant about it. Like, the entire thing of all the gyroscopes is they stay still in space, whatever is moving around. That's so awesome about it. So the Ethereans claim, yeah, of course, it drifts. The gyroscope that's specifically designed to never drift, it drifts because of ether. And the Globers say, yeah, and it's designed to correct for the drift that's always there because the Earth is spinning. That's the insane irony of it all. Everybody claims that it's supposed to be spinning when specifically it exists because it isn't spinning, and that's why we use it.
Yeah, but that's the problem. From our opposition, whether it be Ethereum flat earthers or from the Globers, they're going to be constantly changing their position when it comes to ring laser gyros and accelerometers, I'm sure, because they need to, because they're trying to create a story around something that doesn't happen. Airplanes can't have gyros that drift. They can't. They can't have that. You know what I mean? They can't. They need them not to.
Well, they can have that, but they're not going to just leave it broken. This can be quite hazardous. You got to replace it with one that doesn't drift like it's supposed to.
When they calibrate these things on the tarmac before they leave to make sure they're working right. Do you know what I mean? The same for a ship when they're using a fiber optic gyro, which is another version of a Lite gyro, with the gyro compass. They must give it half an hour to make sure it's completely right, working right, before they can use the gyro compass. They don't just turn it on and go. It takes half an hour, and that's from captains online. You can go and check it online. Ships captains who are captains of big container ships and all kinds of transport ships. They need a half an hour to make sure it's all right before they can start using the gyro compass with a fiber optic gyro, which is the same, which is just a different version. The ring laser and fiber optic are both Lite gyros.
Right. Just like they need a diesel engine to start up for it to work properly. It needs to get warm first.
You can't drive if your engine's not on. You know what I mean? It's nonsense. It's just they don't do what they need them to do. They don't. These people who have beliefs about them, these things don't do what they need them to do. That's the problem. In reality, they do what they're supposed to do, which is help ships and airplanes get around the place.
Just to reiterate that point, that half-hour calibration thing is to ensure that it is precise ascertainment of the flat plane it's going to navigate over. Yeah, and if it moves forwards, that flat plane changes if you're traversing a ball. So does it need another half an hour? Because your tangent plane on a ball will have changed, won't it? It doesn't. It has not got changing planes. It's got one, and it requires that time period to calibrate to that for accuracy. That's
exactly
one flat plane it's calibrating to.
You just give me a quick.
When you showed.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, when Adam showed with his airplane example on the flight to Europe, where he spent a couple of hours on a flight to Europe, showing with the accelerometer that it was registering parallel downs. There's no diverging downs, or it was registering the same down in the same direction at all times. There was no divergent in the downs. Do you understand what I mean? They weren't diverging and going to the center of a globe. They were staying equally parallel at all times.
Exactly. All downs were parallel.
Okay, should we carry on with the video now? We've gone off on that segue for about 10 minutes.
If you hit the floor, you're very suddenly accelerated again, which has, well, measurable consequences. In Newtonian gravity, you introduce this new force that you call the gravitational force and say, if you're on top of the building, that force of gravity cancels that from the building pushing on you. So now there's no net force acting on you, and Newton says you're not accelerated. If you jump off the building, Newton would say, the force from below disappears and there's only the gravitational force acting on you. And
So therefore, there's a force of mass attracting mass that's working on you. Yeah, that's debunked by gas behavior, though, isn't it, Sabine? We've covered this already. I know it's had a little 10-minute segue with gyroscopes in between, but we have covered this. That's not the case. We're not just going to accept it because, 109 years ago, Newton said it. Someone's desperate to get a word in. Go ahead, whoever that is.
Throw that balloon off the building next, right?
A balloon off the building. Yeah, exactly, Howard. But no, she said that Newton would say that the force underneath you completely disappears. Newton never said anything about a force underneath you.
I can still see, Brian. Sorry, Brian. When you're talking, for whatever reason, the G+ line cuts your line going into Discord, so they're getting a very choppy experience of you talking whenever it's you coming through my line to Discord. I don't know why. I've tried to make some adjustments just so the people in Discord are aware. I'm aware that you're getting a choppy Brian.
I'll hang up and come back in and see if
No, it's not. I think it's a G+ thing. The way I've had to balance everybody up so that he's disappeared anyway, just to get refracted curvature to not deafen everybody because he's much louder. I've had to balance it up in such a particular way, but it just leaves you being the quietest member of the panel. Unfortunately, Brian, I've given it a bit more gain. Don't worry about it. This is the live show. Let's not worry about it.
Okay.
I'm aware. If you're in Discord, I'm sorry.
And you're accelerated. And if you hit the ground, you suddenly...
She's trying to now straw man. Go ahead.
She's trying to straw man Newton to become an Umi.
Don't use the abbreviation. Explain to the audience what an Umi.
She's trying to straw man Newton into some form of upward moving Earth. As you said there, she's now describing what Newton would say to claim that there's an upward force by the top of the building. Whereas I don't think Newton would claim that. It's just in fall arrest. There's something in the way. It's not applying upward force according to Newton. It's just blocking. It's just the ground. So and then according to Newton, that's what's then going to constitute weight. Yeah, or according to ascribers of Newton, that's what will then constitute weight. That downward force being arrested by the ground or the top of the building, that downward force then makes your weight. W equals mg in this case from Newton. But she's not saying that. She's saying that Newton would ascribe to, no, there's an upward force. Well, that's straw manning him.
Yeah, that's right. I was gonna. I noticed that. It's like, no, that's not the way that Newton actually described things. It's weird, Sabine. Why are you putting those things in Newton's shoes? He didn't do that.
In case the new magic trick fails, there's got to be some segue back into the old magic trick. Now, for it to make sense in this particular context, that's what she's having to do. You've got to lie to bluff.
You've got to call your top priest. I mean, you're basically, that's blasphemy. As far as I can see, there's no, I know he didn't even want you to ascribe gravity to him. Never mind with upward moving Earth. Come on, Sabine, that is disingenuous.
Disingenuous at best,
right?
An outright lie at worst. You say blasphemy. Well, she knows Newton's rhetoric. We've seen her cover it in various guises before. So I know she knows it, therefore not blasphemy, just an outright lie. She's trying to square the circle, right?
Yeah, I'll go with the latter. It is just a straight lie.
Yep.
It's deception.
I've already called her out for it in various parts of this video. If you're going to be a bitch, be the whole bitch.
Total misrepresentation.
Go on, Owen.
It's a total misrepresentation of Newton's ideas. And if you really know about Newton, you should be spotting that.
To zero acceleration. The Newtonian picture is the one we learn at school, and it's useful so long as you are on Earth, but strictly speaking, it's wrong, because you can't just redefine what you mean by zero acceleration.
What, like you've been doing this entire video?
Exactly. Confessional debating.
Yep. Absolutely correct.
Yeah,
debating.
This is like somebody trying to sell you the London Bridge, and in the middle of the pack, they go, "But I don't own the bridge." Anyway, you want to buy the bridge? Con man.
It's more like her saying, well, ownership of the bridge is convoluted and not necessarily in my possession, but we'll continue with this sale. The transaction will continue. Lots of nice long words.
You can't do that because acceleration is not a relative quantity. If you're staying in place in a gravitational field, so you aren't falling.
If you beg the question that you're moving when not traveling,
then you are not at zero acceleration.
I see. So we're not at zero when we're at 1 because we're not moving. If we accept this, we can then move forth into pseudo-geometry that doesn't explain reality. Gotcha. We don't accept this. Go ahead.
Sorry, Nathan. I was just wondering, like, gravitational field, you say? Well, what is that? What's a gravitational field? That's not like Newtonian law of gravitation, I hope, because he specifically disclaimed that.
No, it's been pseudo-force-based geometry, Owen.
As any accelerometer will tell you. Now, of course, physicists are no linguistic.
But there's no
gravitational fields in general relativity.
Right. It's like a Newtonian phrase, but he disclaimed it. So why is Sabine using it?
They all use it. They all just throw out this term, gravitational field, because they want gravity to be something like magnetism.
A force.
Yes.
Yes, because they still need a force.
Saints, and they'll sometimes refer to gravity as a force, even though it isn't. A typical example is when they speak of the 4 fundamental forces of nature. If they're being careful, they'll refer to it as the gravitational interaction and the 4 fundamental interactions. But often they don't. I think
they need to redefine their term because they've incorporated a gravitational force that isn't a force when they describe it as a force in this description that you say is wrong, but therefore we need to describe all of the forces and interactions because it's a gravitational interaction.
No, she's calling all her peers liars or stupid. Because these PhD people who refer to the 4 fundamental forces, they're obviously so stupid or fraudsters because they're referring, it's an interaction. It's not a force. So she's kind of admitting that at the highest echelons, they're using the totally incorrect word. Only reason being to maintain a heliocentric paradigm. But she's admitted that her peers are using the wrong words.
Right. And the four fundamental interactions, or if you wanted to do it that way, would be the weak, strong, electromagnetic, and resistance to entropy. Not gravity.
I think they really just call it a force because that starts with an F. In a nutshell, why is gravity not a force? Because if you are only exposed to the gravitational interaction, you fall.
Because if you're only exposed to the force... What? Why is it not a force? Because if you're exposed to the gravitational force, that's essentially what they're saying.
Yep.
And that is measurably.
Say again, Brian.
She said the gravitational interaction.
Oh, well, she disclaimed that away. They just like using the word with the beginning letter F, Brian.
Yeah.
When she threw all of her peers under the bus, Adam.
Well, she's now throwing acceleration under the bus, isn't she? She's trying her best to pervert this, to get to the point that acceleration might be if you go forwards in a car, but actually what we can't do, because we know we live on a spinning space pair, we can't therefore drop something, measure its rate of acceleration, which is Newtonian, and call it an acceleration anymore, because we know it's not an acceleration, it's just a interaction caused by the bending of space-time, which we perceive, but we now know we can't call it an acceleration, because it can't be, because an acceleration requires a force, and we know from that waffle we've just listened to that it's not a force, it's just an interaction.
Not an acceleration. If you need to freshen up your knowledge of forces and Newton's laws before taking on Einstein's ideas, the best place to start is brilliant.org. They have lovely courses on Newtonian gravity and classical mechanics, and even on special relativity. And not for brush, they come with as I can do it everywhere it works, what superpositions, and for 3% off.
Wait, hold on, Nathan. She said, wow, these people have lovely research on Newtonian forces?
Yep.
But I thought it didn't exist.
Yeah, and she said, but before you get to Einstein's ideas. Ideas, wow.
Technically, she said Einstein.
That's the right way to say it.
A shout out to Flat Earth Travolta, who says the show is ace. Really appreciate it. Right, any rounding out comments before I ask people to stay tuned?
She did the same thing that I've called her for 3 times. So that was the 4th time. Yeah, she's done her spiel and then gone off into a load of other stuff. Where at this point, she's kind of said to you, if you weren't clever enough to understand everything I said and you need to brush up, i.e. get more understanding, let me refer you to these websites so you can understand what was obviously too complicated for you to understand, i.e. you just didn't believe me. Go and brush up on this rhetoric. Go to Bible class for heliocentrics. Understand the doctrine, which is just the exact doctrine that we just ripped apart, the gobbledygook. So she's just asking, go and confuse yourself and just believe in how this force is not a force. But hopefully what she's done is empowered some of the blurfs to be able to go, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's not a force. That's the purpose of this.
With that, I'm going to say if you're watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. Another massive thank you to Daniel Samaniego, said his name right for the first time, for smashing the super chat and gifting out some free memberships. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on an after show. Massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making the live show possible. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a name! What a lovely name!